This is America, where economic pressure is the new front line in the conflict with Iran. Questions over a U.S. blockade in the Strait of Hormuz and a high-stakes bet that Iran will blink first. I'll be back a little later in the program as we explore this. But to start us off, here's Anna Burns-Francis.
Thanks, Manny. Shifting strategies in the war on Iran has seen the Strait of Hormuz become the focus of the United States, a waterway the president said he had no interest in until now. Our chief US correspondent, Alan Fisher, joins us from the White House today, and Kristen Salumi is outside the New York Stock Exchange. The clash of geopolitics and the price of oil is causing pain not just for Iran, but its allies and enemies alike around the world. Even the US president is promising his party base and viewers tuning into Fox Business the pain is worth the price.
If you told me that we were going to be at only $92 a barrel, $92 a barrel, I would have been very surprised.
All right.
And you know what? I'm very happy. And it's going to come dropping down very big as soon as it's over. And I think it can be over very soon.
But do everyday Americans believe him? Richard Gaisford went to the Watergate Exxon station to find out.
Well, you can see here in the nation's capital that fuel has reached very nearly $6 a US gallon. That is more than $2 per litre. The politicians just down the road in the Capitol building have been on their Easter holidays. As they've been relaxing, the price has been going up. The question is, will Donald Trump's strategy work and eventually bring down prices?
I'd love to say yes, I hope it comes down soon, but it doesn't seem likely. At least not in the foreseeable next 2 to 3 months. It seems like with the backlog that they've got to work through, it's going to take much longer than that to bring down some prices for us.
Will it go back to what it was before? I don't know, because I'm not sure what it looks like on the ground. I think a lot has been destroyed, but I think he'll move on to something else.
Well, I certainly hope they don't go up any further. It's bad enough as it is. So, it's becoming unaffordable for most. We just hope that it comes to an end soon, sooner rather than later.
Do you have hope that it will?
Absolutely, 100%.
And you trust the president's strategy in this?
No comment.
I don't think anyone is going to back out. So this is a game of chicken that we have to wait and see what's going to happen. But we as the American people shouldn't have to suffer.
And how much suffering can you take? How much more pain can you take?
We cannot go on like this into the midterms. We need help immediately.
In a moment, Kristen Salumi joins us from outside the New York Stock Exchange. But first, let's go to Alan Fisher at the White House. Alan, how much of that domestic pressure is a concern to the president?
Well, we keep hearing this as short-term pain for long-term gain. They believe that come the midterms, this will all be forgotten. But there's a few realities to all of this for Donald Trump. First of all, he was the president who campaigned that within the first year, oil prices would be down. He'd half everyone's bills. It'd be cheaper to fill up your car. But what we've seen over the last 5-6 weeks is that oil prices have gone up by about 20%. That immediately has a knock-on, because everyone who uses gas, uses petrol, suddenly has to bump up their prices to meet that. That means that food becomes much more expensive. And if you're spending a lot more money on food and filling up your car to get to work, you don't have disposable income. What does that mean? Well, you don't have money to go and spend in the shops. So the shops start to take a hit as well. Now, how long will this last? Well, most people say that the difficulty with supply chains is going to go on for several weeks. And the reason for that is that prices for insurance on ships that bring things through the strait and travel there, well, that's going up as well. And that will last for some considerable time. So all of these things add into problems for Donald Trump. What does it mean politically? Well, as I said, he's the president that said he was going to cut oil prices. He was going to cut energy bills. And if that doesn't happen, people will say, well, what are you going to do for us next and how can we believe you? This is going to be a long-term impact for the United States. So yeah, Donald Trump can talk about short-term pain for long-term gain, but he's got to try and convince the American people that that's actually the case.
Yeah, Kristen, I'll bring you in here because somewhat surprisingly, markets have rallied of late. So does that mean investors are not worried about oil prices?
That is the question. Investors may be worried, but two factors right now seem to be driving investor optimism. One is the strength of corporate earnings, with big tech and finance right now still doing well in the markets and leading the way. And also there's a belief that a resolution will come sooner rather than later. And we're talking at a time when the S&P 500 stock market index is flirting with all-time highs. It's recovered from the declines it saw after the start of the war, despite rising oil prices and despite this uncertain geopolitical landscape. It's being led by companies like Apple and Meta, who are still forecasting strong earnings. But on the other hand, you have this issue of higher gas prices that is starting to weigh on consumer prices. It's pushing up consumer prices, and Treasury yields. It's also pushing those up. That's has expectations of an interest rate cut for the rest of the year now disappearing. Things that would normally be considered bad news for investors. Investors seem to be counting on Donald Trump's strategy of finding an off-ramp and protecting the markets. But the longer that this continues, we're hearing warnings coming from the head of the IMF that a global recession is possible if these pressures continue on inflation and if oil prices continue to rise.
Kristen Salumi joining us from New York, and Alan Fisher at the White House. Thank you both. Well, after weeks of strikes and stalled diplomacy, it's clear the US is shifting strategy. The American blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, designed to choke off Iran's oil exports and force concessions, has many wondering who will feel the pressure first. Let's go back to Manny Rapolo for a look at how the US media is framing the story.
A lot of back and forth from U.S. news media over the economics of the ongoing conflict in Iran. And that's why today we're outside the International Monetary Fund here in Washington, D.C., where meetings are being held to discuss the war. Now, let's start with the Wall Street Journal with this headline: IMF warns of deep global downturn if war is prolonged. Now, this reporting goes on to say, quote, a prolonged Middle East conflict could slash global growth to rates seen only in the deepest recent recessions. Now, all of this economic uncertainty appears to stem, at least in part, from confusion over the latest phase of the conflict in Iran and who exactly has control over the Strait of Hormuz. Here's CNN breaking this down.
You've got a double blockade, essentially. Yeah. You've got the US essentially blockading Iranian-linked tankers, and then you've got the existing restrictions and threats. And if you do engage with the Iranians, are the US going to get you, and vice versa? The shipping industry is stuck in the middle right now.
Now, there's also a lot of talk over leverage and what cards Iran has left to play. Check out this opinion article from Foreign Affairs. For Iran, Hormuz is more a weakness than a weapon. And that report goes on to say, quote, Tehran claims to have shown the world that it has tremendous leverage over other economies. But that narrative mistakes tactical pressuring over strategic resilience. Now, let's head over to Fox Business. Here's U.S. Senate Majority Leader John Thune reinforcing that idea.
And obviously, they are now in a position where if they don't get back to the table here pretty soon, they're going to be feeling a lot of hurt. They've already felt that in their military and all their production facilities for their drones and ballistic missiles and everything else, their Navy, which has been completely destroyed. But now we're talking about their economy, and that has something that has real implications for the Iranian people, and hopefully the pressure will start to build on their leadership to make a deal.
Now, there is, of course, another line of thinking here. Take a listen to this analysis on the Economist podcast, suggesting the U.S. may be underestimating Iran's ability to weather the storm.
So my concern is Iran can endure months of this pressure. You know, it can print money, it can sell something like 100 million barrels of oil that has some floating storage off Malaysia or China, and it can get credit lines off some of its buyers. So all in all, my concern is this will take far longer to essentially bring Iran to its knees than I think Donald Trump can stomach.
Right now, this isn't just a standoff at sea, it's a test of economic endurance. The U.S. betting that pressure will break Iran. Tehran betting Washington will blink first. And caught in the middle, a global economy that's already feeling the strain.
Well, control of the Strait of Hormuz was not one of America's original reasons for launching its war on Iran. Now it's pushed the war into an unpredictable and potentially dangerous phase. Rosalind Jordan reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump says imposing a blockade on Iran after more than 6 weeks of bombings is a matter of national security.
We can't let a country blackmail or extort the world, because that's what they're doing. They're really blackmailing the world. We're not going to let that happen.
Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz right after the war started on February 28th, charging friendly countries a fee to let their ships through while denying passage to those linked to its enemies, the U.S. and Israel. Now Washington has responded with economic warfare of its own, following the collapse of last weekend's peace talks in Pakistan.
Thank you.
Its goal? Shutting down Iranian oil and gas exports, which make up 80% of its export income. Another aircraft carrier is joining the blockade, which can be seen as an extension of Trump's long-running maximum pressure campaign on Iran, using sanctions to starve the Iranian economy, thus putting pressure on negotiators to concede. Experts question whether the blockade will draw the U.S. military deeper into the conflict. As the U.S. found out during 2 wars with the British, controlling the waterways is a big key to victory. But Trump's decision to impose a blockade shows a decided shift in his war policy, a choice to use a vital strait as a weapon against Iran, even at the risk to global security and economic stability. Back on March 20th, Washington gave Tehran an olive branch. It would let Iran deliver some 140 million barrels of oil already in transit and collect the payments. The idea being this could also help stabilize global energy prices. But now, the U.S.-Iranian struggle over control of the Strait of Hormuz can only mean one thing: prolonged economic pain on the rest of the world. Rosalind Jordan, Al Jazeera, Washington.
So what does that pain look like then for Iran? Oil accounts for 80% of the Iranian government's export earnings. Before the US naval blockade, Iran was exporting 1.5 million barrels a day. An effective blockade zeroes that out instantly. Iran is now losing up to $276 million a day in exports. That's $8.28 billion a month. All the while, oil is piling up in storage. It's believed Iran only has around 11 days of storage space left, and after that, wells may have to start shutting down, risking permanent damage. Will the new US strategy in the Strait work then to end the war? Joining us to discuss today is economist Alan Tunnelson and former US Assistant Secretary of State for Public Affairs, PJ Crowley. Thank you both for joining me today. Alan, I'll start with you. Ships are still getting through. Is the blockade working?
Ships are still getting through, but very soon, if not starting today, none of those ships are going to be carrying cargo that comes from Iran, and that's going to further cripple Iran's already crippled economy. And it's going to put mounting pressure on Tehran. Now, whether this is going to eventually, whatever the time frame you think is applicable, is going to result in the kind of a comprehensive deal that President Trump seems to want, I'm not certain about that. At the same time, I'm not at all certain that that's what the United States needs, because in my view, the United States has already accomplished its essential aims of severely degrading Iran's nuclear program and severely degrading Iran's various conventional means of projecting power overseas. That's all that we really need, and I think that even in the absence of a larger deal, the U.S. military has enough power to enforce what will turn out to be a very acceptable status quo, if not entirely satisfactory.
Alan, your thoughts? I saw you listening intently there, and I know Alan took a couple of different points out there about whether this was going to be an effective mechanism in resolving the war here. But is the blockade working the way the US projects that it intended it to?
From a US military standpoint, the blockade is very straightforward. You've got a relatively confined space. You've got just a few ships trying to find their way through the strait. It is very easy, and in fact, so far, We've seen Iranian ships already turn around and return to port. So the blockade can work. The question is, to what end? Alan raised the point of what is the United States actually seeking? Is it a comprehensive deal? That's not something that can easily be accomplished in the time pressures that we're talking about.
Yeah.
As part of the Obama administration, we started the process in 2009, got to the finish line in 2015, for a variety of reasons. So, can the two sides come together in this kind of time constraint under this pressure? That remains to be seen.
Alan, in terms of an effective blockade then, it is, or it appears to be at this stage, largely due to compliance. There are plenty of ships out there that are not Iranian flagged ships. They're from Hong Kong, China. I had a look today, there's Panama, all in a line. Now, the US military or Navy cannot effectively jump aboard all of those ships if they all decided to sail straight through, could they?
No, but it can establish deterrence. And as we've seen...
Militarily?
It can establish enough hesitation in the minds of those shippers and those companies to prevent many of them from even trying. And we saw this when, of course, Iran decided to institute its own blockade several weeks ago. The Iranian Navy didn't have the ability to stop every single ship. It didn't need that. And the United States Navy, which is much stronger, won't need that either.
Yeah. PJ, Iran's losses at the moment, imports and exports, totaling estimates around $13 billion a month. But this is a nation that has lived through years of sanctions so far. And the pain point for America is not the pain point of Iran. So does Iran have a breaking point if this blockade remains in place?
There's no question that there would be an economic breaking point. The question is how far into the future that is. And then, conversely, what is Donald Trump's political threshold, for pain in the intervening time? That's, who's going to blink first? Who can live through the pain? That's the essential question as we continue through this conflict.
Do you have an estimate on time for how long you think Iran can last?
I agree with The Economist in the opening piece. I think that Iran has shown an ability to withstand pain, for a significant, period of time. But we'll see. To me, the essential question is whether Trump is looking for some sort of interim arrangement that allows for an off-ramp from this conflict. But if he's looking for the maximalist negotiation positions that originated with the Trump during the first term, that's going to be a very, very hard lift.
Yeah. Vice President J.D. Vance has said Iran would be wise to accept the US deal to avoid any further pain.
We are going to make Iran thrive. We're going to make it economically prosperous, and we're going to invite the Iranian people into the world economy in a way they haven't been in my entire life. And that's the kind of Trumpian grand bargain that the president has put on the table. Man, we're going to keep on negotiating and try to make it happen because it would be great for the world.
Alan, Donald Trump's betting here that the lower economic threshold will hurt Iran before it hurts America. Is that a bet that you would make?
I would make that bet. I wouldn't make that with an incredible amount of confidence, but I find it very revealing that soon after President Trump expressed confidence that U.S. gas prices at the pump in particular would fall very rapidly once this war ended, whenever that would be, he's now saying that those gas prices are likely to stay high at least through this coming summer, which is, of course, the peak driving season each year, and possibly longer. So it seems that he's ignoring at this point, or at least downplaying, the likely domestic politics of this policy, although they clearly don't look good for the Republican Party at this point.
That's domestically. PJ, of course, friends and foes around the world here, allies in particular, pretty unhappy about, well, the strait being closed in the first place, but also no further movement towards it opening. In fact, everything sort of seems to be constricting here. Can I ask you, will President Trump be a little reluctant then to pick up the phone with the UK and other European nations calling him at the moment? How will that relationship be looking?
I mean, this is the paradox of Donald Trump. A normal American leader, as the leader of the free world, would be very attentive to the views and tribulations of his closest allies. Donald Trump doesn't care. So I don't think that he's going to be swayed by convincing arguments by some of who he considers his friends or frenemies. I think he's going to be strictly focused on what is the situation here in the United States, the political pressures that he may or may not feel, from the Congress or from the American people. That's going to drive his decision making.
Yeah. Alan, if another nation like France, for instance, as an example, wants to do a deal with Iran, wants to make some kind of trade there, what claim does the United States have to block that trade?
U.S. national interests, which always are the number one consideration above everything else when it comes to making any country's foreign policy.
So they don't have a claim to block that?
I don't understand what claim actually means. I mean, certainly we're not talking about international law, which is, as every adult observer of global politics knows, is honored in the breach at very best by virtually every major power. I think it's going to be exclusively, and in fact should be exclusively, a matter of which country can impose its will most effectively. And at this point, it's clearly the United States.
Okay. China, often considered a pragmatic world power, but also an ally of Iran, has hit out at the US blockade. Take a listen.
The US increased military deployment and targeted blockade actions will only intensify contradictions, heighten tensions, undermine the already fragile ceasefire, and further impact the safety of navigation in the strait. This is dangerous and irresponsible behavior. China believes that only by achieving a comprehensive ceasefire and end of hostilities can conditions be fundamentally created to ease the situation in the strait.
PJ, how much does the situation in the Strait risk a confrontation between the US and China?
I think this is actually a potential safety valve. Donald Trump has an important meeting coming up with President Xi next month.
Yeah.
And I think he wants to go to Beijing having resolved this, as opposed to going to Beijing and being lectured, about this. The dilemma here is, as the United States tries to impose its will on Iran, China is taking close notes in terms of whether down the road it wishes to impose its will on Taiwan. So there's a precedent that we are establishing here that has long-term implications.
It's also not quite clear how this is practically meant to work if it goes on for any length of time, right? I mean, how would a US naval ship out there at the moment even prove whether a vessel had paid an Iranian toll or not?
I think that would be up to that vessel to show that it hasn't paid one. I think
an absence of evidence, though, is not proof either way.
Again, we're not talking about courts of law here. We're talking about the United States imposing its will to advance its own national interest. And by the way, all the other countries that have been so critical, especially U.S. allies of this war, need to ask themselves, what kind of blackmail from Iran would they have been exposed to had these military operations not taken place, with Tehran continuing to build its offensive missile arsenal, and with it continuing to make further progress in its nuclear program?
That's a huge hypothetical, though, isn't it?
Sorry?
That's a huge hypothetical, reliant on the basis that war was the only answer.
Why else? Well, it often, tragically, it often is, but why else would Iran be building such enormous offensive military capabilities?
I mean, I'm not Iran, so I can't answer that, but PJ, you might have an opinion on that.
Fair enough.
Many of the origins of where Iran is today go back to the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, and Iran felt itself isolated at that point. And in particularly, the nuclear program came initially in its origins as a counterbalance to the Iraqi, nuclear program. But I mean, fast forward to today, I do think that we have the contours of a deal that are visible. The real question is, what is the United States going to give Iran in return for any concession that Iran makes on missiles, on nuclear, on proxies? To J.D. Vance's point about bringing Iran into the economy, one of the intriguing questions here is Iran now has an economic card it didn't have before. It can charge a toll in the Strait of Hormuz. Is that going to be the way in which they gain reparations so they can rebuild their country? That's an interesting proposition, one that Trump as a businessman might find attractive or at least understandable. But that will also levy a new expense on the global economy that we haven't had before.
I want to make things fair to the end of this here, Alan. So just quickly, and then PJ, you as well. Do you see the blockade lasting to the end of the current ceasefire?
Oh, absolutely. No question about that.
PJ?
I think the blockade will lead to an extension of the ceasefire. Where the negotiation goes from there remains to be seen.
Alan Tunnelson, economist, thank you very much for joining us. And PJ Crowley, former US Assistant Secretary of State for Public Affairs. Those shifting strategies around the Strait of Hormuz are being picked apart online. Alex Baird has this roundup of the conversation on social media.
The Strait of Hormuz, a tale of two blockades. The US military claiming all of Iran's maritime trade is at a standstill. The response from Iran's supporters defiant online with another viral Lego video. Hormuz hustle. But White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller is adamant that confidence is misplaced, with Iran now in a box. Checkmate.
In Iran, with the implementation of this blockade, is the total resetting of the American power dynamic for the next 100 years.
Conservative journalist Eric Doherty rallying behind that, saying Iran's economy is on the brink of collapse and its currency is on the brink of collapse. Miad Maliki is one of the brains behind the sanctions on Iran. He believes Trump's blockade will bring Iran's oil industry to its knees within 2 weeks.
Iran's going to run out of the ability to store oil, and then they're going to have to drop their extraction.
That take has been big online, with Maliki's assessment that Iran is hemorrhaging $435 million every day in economic damage. Others watching from the sidelines, many Americans confused what any of this actually means. Flip the coin, and some see it as a game of economic terrorism. The US and Iran playing at either end of a table. The Institute for the Study of War saying Iran is now pledging to open new fronts and increase its economic pressure on the United States. Mario Norfal saying the latest blockade is off to an effective start. All eyes now on Tehran. Will they push back or keep playing it safe?
Well, that's all from the team here in Washington, D.C., where we've been looking at the shifting strategies of the White House. On This Is America, we'll keep following the decisions that shape the US and influence the world. If you want to catch up on this episode or previous ones, you can head to our website, aljazeera.com, or check out our YouTube channel. For now, we'll hand back to Al Jazeera's global headquarters in Doha. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again tomorrow.